Good afternoon. My name is Nihal Krishan. I'm a junior at Arizona State University studying broadcast journalism and political science. We're currently filming from the 6th floor of the Cronkite School at Arizona State's downtown campus. The topic of today's ASU Democrats versus Republicans debate is guns. 1 year ago today, gun control was the centerpiece of President Obama's State of the Union address. Since then, there have been 28 school shootings in 2013 and 9 school shootings just in the past 18 days of school thus far in 2014. There have been shootings at Widener University, Purdue University in Indiana, and South Carolina State University just in the past 2 weeks itself. As you can tell, mass shootings have become almost commonplace now and very often occur on school campuses like our own at ASU. This is why guns have become an increasingly important topic an issue in society today. Joining me today are Michael Martinez on my left, National Chair of the Young Democrats of America College Caucus and a political science major at ASU.
Thanks for having me.
On my right, I have Carlos Alfaro, ASU College Republicans President and an economics and history major at ASU.
Thank you.
So we're going to kick off the debate today by talking about the role that guns play in society today in America. Why is it that guns are still legal in America today, and why does our average citizen need access to a gun? Given the historical context of the Second Amendment, it is no longer applicable today, and most countries in the world do not legally allow citizens to keep and bear arms. Why is America any different? We'll start with you, Carlos.
Thank you. I actually kind of find this question a little partisan and misleading because legally, the Supreme Court has ruled on this. In 2008, in the decision in D.C. versus Heller, the Supreme Court ruled on the favor of the Second Amendment and the right of individuals to carry and use firearms for self-defense. So legally, it still applies today, and it is incorrect for that reason. The question that you posed also ignores the history and cultural heritage that we hold here in America. Why are guns legal today? Because we believe that it's a human right. It's a right at the center of our Western liberal tradition, and I think we should respect that. Not we as you and I, but also the government to the individual should respect that. It's a practical good. Self-defense, when we try to take away firearms from law-abiding citizens, what usually ends up happening, the unintended consequence of that, is that criminals end up with a monopoly on the firearms. The people that are going to listen to the rules are going to listen, and they're going to become without arms. So what I want is for us to get real about gun control, not allow only criminals to carry them, and have it be more accessible to law-abiding citizens. It is a moral good because we can't give the rights away of victims when they're being attacked upon. We can't take their right away to self-defense.
Thank you. Michael, what do you think the role of guns is in our society today, and should guns remain legal in America?
So I don't think that they have a role in our society anymore. You know, we have this fascination with guns that stems from media, basically glorifying guns and gun violence in video games and in TV and movies, and that has given us a love affair with guns. And this love affair is definitely true in our state. Where, you know, our state was in the wild, wild west. The way of the gun could have easily been our state motto. And, you know, even to this day, we have a state legislature that's more concerned with protecting guns from people than people from guns. You know, the most basic function of our government is to ensure the safety and security of its people. And in this regard, our government is failing. Every day, Americans across the country are falling victim to gun violence. There will be several people who will die. There will be hundreds of people who will be shot, and nearly 1,000 people will be a victim of armed robbery or assault with a gun. And these are issues that we need to address.
Great. So my next question is for you, Carlos. Many Republicans are opposed to gun control laws and are strong supporters of the Second Amendment, like yourself. Why do you think that granting people more access to guns and perhaps even encouraging people to own and use guns is better for the safety and security of our people?
Well, readily available information and training always is better and more safe for our people, especially when firearms are so ingrained in our culture and in our everyday life. They do play a role every day because they protect our communities, they protect our homes. I believe that there's a grand illusion that says that government can write something on a piece of paper and wish it away. Guns cannot be like this. If we've learned anything from prohibition in alcohol or drugs, is that you can't just simply say, we want this stuff to go away, so we're going to write a law about it. A recent example of this is in 1994, Bill Clinton signed into law the federal assault weapons ban, and it banned some different types of weapons like the AR-15 and the AK-47, as well as some high-capacity magazines, which is the same prescriptions that we get from the anti-gun advocates today. Yet, after those 10 years, after a decade of having that in place and had it not work, it expired. Congress didn't vote it back in because it clearly didn't work. For example, the University of Pennsylvania did a study analyzing the effects on crime after the bill was passed in 1994 and throughout the 10 years, and they said, we cannot clearly credit the ban with any of the nation's recent drop in gun violence, and indeed, there has been no discernible reduction in lethality and injudiciousness for gun violence, which means that it did not work. We have studies on this. We have historical proof that when you put a gun ban in place, it does not restrict the guns, and it doesn't lower the gun crime rate because most assaults happen with a handgun.
So just to clarify, you don't think that the government or laws can play any significant role in decreasing gun violence at all?
Oh, they can definitely. I agree, but not the way that they've been doing. The way that gun advocates prescribe their solution to the violence is to do something that hasn't been working, to do the same things over and over, have it not work, and then try to do it over again. I think we need to go different directions. I think education and readily available information on how to use guns, how to be trained, and how to shoot a gun is the best way to fight against these misuses of those tools.
Great, thank you. Michael, what are your thoughts? How do you think we can be using laws and the government as a tool to try and reduce gun violence?
So I actually find it interesting that Carlos would bring up the 10-year ban that we had on military-style assault rifles. Because during those 10 years of that ban, the percentage of assault rifles traced to crime fell by 66%. That itself shows that it works. And another ban that very few people talk about is the 80-year ban that we've had on machine guns, sawed-off shotguns, silencers, grenades, and bombs. These are all weapons that are made for war, not civilian use, and that 80-year ban that we have had has worked. You don't see crimes being committed with machine guns. You don't see holdup of a Circle K with a grenade because there is no market for these weapons anymore. They've been completely eliminated from our streets, and there's other laws that we can be doing that or could be passing that could address it that aren't directly related to guns, and that's our mental health services. We should be funding mental health services and identifying people who have mental illnesses. And we should also start talking about universal background checks. This is something that we need to do. There's no reason why a felon or someone who's mentally ill should be able to walk into a gun show and walk out with a assault rifle, with an AR-15 or AK-47 without even having their background checked.
So as Carlos mentioned before, we don't want to be reusing or rehearsing laws and strategies that have not worked in the past and just try and implement them again. So as a Democrat, what methods do you suggest for gun control laws, and if so, which ones and why?
So the first one I would say is what I just talked about: universal background checks. In the last 14 years, federal background checks have stopped 1.5 million transactions. They work. If you look at Colorado, who just recently passed universal background checks in their state, just within a few months, around 87 transactions were stopped. This is something that's common sense. 9 out of 10 Americans believe that it should be passed, and for some reason our Congress just won't take up the issue. And it's something that we need to do. It's very common sense. And then, like I said, we need to be looking at mental health services, not only for adults, but for children as well. We should be funding counselors to identify early on in a child's life if they have a mental illness, so we can treat them so that it doesn't lead to violence later on.
So as we've kind of recognized in multiple surveys done, over 90% of the American public does support universal background checks, yet this has not passed in Congress and has not been enacted into law. What do you think about this, and do you think that it is a solution for gun violence?
Well, I think it's interesting that we bring up opinion polls because if we ask the majority of the people, they are slowly but surely getting the idea, waking up and knowing that just putting a gun in the books, it's not going to take our guns away. There was a study conducted last month by Reason Roop, and their poll found that 63% of Americans are skeptical and remain skeptical of gun control laws keeping actual guns from criminals. So that, and what's even more interesting, because there is no fight over this in the on the right side or in the Republican Party, more than half of Democrats also are on the same page, understanding that a simple law, even if it's federal, if it's state, is not going to take the supply of those guns away. And 2/3 of independents believe the same. Education about guns and gun control is increasing, and so is our understanding on how to deal with it. Dealing with it with a legislation and with a rule that says that you simply can't have guns here is the old way. It's the way that didn't work. It's time to think of new ways for modern America, knowing that guns are going to be readily available in our culture and play a role in protecting us every single day. We have to start thinking of new ideas. For example, teaching our kids on what to do when you find a loaded gun in the house or in the street. We don't teach our kids that.
But what do you think specifically about universal background checks and making it more difficult for your average citizen to get access to a gun, or at least having more barriers for one to get access to a gun?
Again, I think it's only affecting those who are willing to go through that background check. You're not affecting the guy who's buying the guns out in the back alley or in the underground market anywhere. You're only affecting those who are more likely to get trained, those who are more likely to keep the guns for self-defense and for sport. Those people are the ones being affected. You can never think that you're affecting the criminals by a simple ban. Prohibition of alcohol, prohibition of drugs show us that, and it's historical and it's factual. So,
I have to address that, because if you're a criminal and you know you can go into a gun show and buy an AR-15 rather than trying to go from some illegal gun dealer, then you're gonna go to the gun show and you're gonna buy it legally. So to me, saying that it won't make it harder for criminals to get guns, that's just untrue, because it will make it harder. And proven it. I already said 1.5 million transactions stopped in the last 14 years. And in Colorado, it's working as well. It's proven to work. And I don't see how anyone could be against at least making the process harder so that we screen out people that shouldn't be able to get guns. That, to me, it's common sense. And to 9 out of 10 Americans, it's common sense, and it's something that we should do.
But it's not about the tool that they use. It's about the actual violent crime that's being committed. You can say, yeah, they don't use the big, scary-looking guns, maybe because they're not concealed right or whatever, but the violence is still occurs. The violence is still here, and the supply is still here. We have to find a better way, and rather than these antiquated rules that haven't been working. I don't understand how we can think it's morally permissible to take somebody's human right of self-defense away in the hopes that these rules will work the second time again or the third time again.
So I have another question for Michael. So Republicans like Carlos make the valid point that even in an ideal world, let's say where guns are illegal to the general public, criminals will still have access to guns, like in many parts of the world. And so what do you think civilians should be using to protect themselves from those who acquire guns and use them for evil from legal or illegal manners?
So I think that it's pretty much, the statistics show that just having a firearm in the house, it doesn't make you safer. It makes you far more likely to be a victim of gun violence. Also, it just doesn't seem logical. Unless you carry your gun on your hip at all times, if you are a victim of someone breaking into your house with a gun, you're not going to stop that person because your gun is not near you. So it's illogical to say that you're safer with a gun in the house. It's just not true, and the statistics prove that. to make yourself safer, it's hard. We need to be funding law enforcement. As far as school safety, we should be funding counselors to identify students with mental health issues. And we should be, the most important thing to make our school more safe is to fund school resource officers. We should not be arming teachers because they're underpaid as they are already. Our legislature is trying to do this again. School resource officers are trained law enforcement. They're officers of the law who are trained to act in these kind of situations, and those are the types of people we should have on our school campuses to protect our students.
You know, I wonder if that was the opinion of the teachers who had to sit through and listen to classroom by classroom this maniac in Newtown, Connecticut, murder their colleagues and their students. I bet they wouldn't have mind having a gun and being called, oh, you're a security person. I don't think they mind once the evil is there. So there's many examples, even here in the Valley, of people trying to break into homes. For example, the father that protected his 4- and 7-year-old children after some guy was trying to pry into his daughter's bedroom. This happened in January of last year, and thankfully he didn't have his gun in his pocket or in his side, but he went to the place where he had his gun safely stored and told the guy to back up. He didn't. He was prying into the home, shot him. To tell him that he doesn't have the right to protect his children is what gun advocates want today. They want a blanket ban. They want these assault weapons bans to further on and eventually have no weapons to be obtained legally, which makes us into a country like down south in Mexico. In Mexico, guns are completely illegal, yet we see a high crime rate. We see drug cartels everywhere because, again, it's an illusion that government can fix our problems, and it can't.
At the same time, we have many Western countries like England and Germany where guns are also illegal, and violence overall, and gun violence specifically, is far lower than America. So we have examples like Mexico where it doesn't seem to work, but we have other examples where banning guns does seem to work.
And that's why we have to pay attention to our cultural history, our legal history, what's legal today, and what role guns play in our society alone, and not try to compare everything to one another.
Okay, so I think we're going to end on this one question, specifically focusing on mass shootings, which have been in the news a lot lately and have been affecting a lot of school campuses specifically. How do you think we can decrease the amount of homicides and violence that result from guns, particularly in reference to these mass shootings that we've been seeing? Carlos, we'll have you go first.
Sure. I think that we are not doing a good job in our education system and telling our parents to educate our children even in their home in knowing how to properly use guns, knowing how to safely store them. That's why we have a problem with safety when guns are in the home. It's not because people are shooting each other, it's because there's accidents that happen. And if a kid doesn't know to treat a weapon like it's loaded at all times, I blame the irresponsible parents and the irresponsible school curriculum that doesn't teach our children to be safe in today's modern world. I think that the best alternative is to arm teachers, have them safely store their weapon in school for safety, and teach children about those guns so that when they come across one, they know exactly what to do. They know how to treat that weapon. We fight it with education, not with government bureaucracy.
Thank you. Michael, what do you think we can do to decrease homicides and violence that result from guns, particularly in reference to mass shootings?
Well, the number one thing we can do is fund mental health services. And that's something that you'll hear me say over and over again. We need to identify those with mental health issues, and we need to treat them. That's the number one thing that we can do. You know, I think it's funny as when we started this debate, Carlos, you said that having a gun, it's a human right. But healthcare isn't, and healthcare is also a human right. And in that debate is included in healthcare is mental health care. So we need to identify, we need to treat. And you know, as far as school resource officers, they're not just security guards. They're officers. They're law enforcement officers who have been assigned to a school. They carry weapons, and they're taught how to handle situations that may arise on campus. such as the Newtown tragedy. Now, I'm not sure, and I don't think that Newtown had an SRO, but if they had one or two SROs on campus, I very highly doubt that it would have turned out the same way. There probably would have still been some children that had died, unfortunately, but it may not have been as bad. We need to fund these SROs to make sure that our campuses are safe, and we need to fund mental health services. To do so is to not do so is just we're playing a dangerous game right now, and we need to address these issues.
I just don't see healthcare anywhere in the Constitution being granted as a right, and that's one of the main differences. The right to self-defense is fundamental. What you need in order to have not only a free life but a free society.
How do you have a life though without healthcare? Like healthcare is part of your survival, and having access to treatment, including mental health, that's something that should be given to us. You have a right to life.
Nobody gives you a gun. Nobody gives you the right. You hold the right when you're born, to inalienable right to self-defense. The government isn't giving you guns. With healthcare, now progressives are saying that government should give you something, that you're born entitled to a service or to a product. This is not the case with gun control, and we can look at it in the same shelf.
Well, I respectfully disagree.
Unfortunately, I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining me, gentlemen. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for our next ASU Democrats versus Republicans debate. This is Nihal Krishan signing off from the Cronkite School.